And we have now a more international perspective. What that means is there are probably more people up here who will be speaking in English or even American. And the title here is Market Recognition and Globalization. You might remember when we were talking about ICAEW experience that a major part of what has driven our institute is the desire of our members to make sure that their qualification and their institute is recognized outside the home market. And that's probably also an important thing for all the bodies represented here to think about, because if the profession is respected, that helps facilitate business and investment in your countries. So to help us this afternoon, we have the panelists that you can see on the programme, apart from the fact that I must apologise that Danny Corrigan can't be with us. I'm told there's a very good excuse, which is something to do with the birth of a child. Not that Danny is having a baby, but I think one of his colleagues is, or one of his colleagues, well, you can applaud him if you want, one of his colleagues' wives is having a baby, so he's having to deputise at short notice in a foreign trip. Nobody else on the panel could think of an equally good excuse to not be here, and so they will be talking to us. And I begin with Sylvia Tsen from ICAEW, who tells me she's very daunted by having to speak within 5 minutes. So Sylvia, speak to us in 5 minutes.
Thank you, Robert. I do have a North American accent, but because I'm not American, 5 minutes doesn't mean I'll start speaking very, very fast. So hopefully I won't go too fast. Well, early in the morning when Robert first opened the session, I recall very distinctly some words he said. And the words were pre-boarding announcement. And I thought, that's a very good way to introduce today's journey. And he clearly was trying to take us on a journey. And we've gone around the world in this part of the world. And I thought what might be useful for us to continue our journey is to address some of the questions that Robert's got about market recognition and globalization, but maybe share with you some perspectives that I've actually learned myself from speaking to our members from other parts of the world. It's just not, well, I was just about to say not this part of the world that's got concerns, but really it's not only your parts of the world that faces the challenges of market recognition, competition, globalization, regulation. All our professional colleagues around the world face the same issue. And it's really nice to see some of the innovative ideas they've got and how they're actually responding to these issues. Some of them are responding in a time of crisis. Robert mentioned that unfortunately, sometimes it seems like our profession grows from crisis. But I've actually got at least one example where it's a proactive step and it's not a result of a crisis. So I'm hoping that some of these ideas will stimulate you. And I've kept them to 3 country examples because of the time limit. But please feel free to come by and I can give you more examples. Taking our tour closest to where we are right now, let's start with Greece. I think when you hear Greece, you're thinking, well, what could possibly be going on that there could be something happening that's improving market recognition? There's a sovereign debt crisis going on. Our Greece member body in ICAEW has lost lots of revenue because of membership. More importantly, and more worrying, a lot of its members have lost their jobs. So what could possibly happen that has increased their market recognition? Well, a couple years ago, they received a phone call from the government of Greece. The government was going through fiscal reform, looking at tax planning. They talked to each other, all economists, parliamentarians, and they thought, why don't we call the accountants? This, to me, is a great short story of what you want to accomplish in terms of market recognition. I think the profession should be seen as thought leaders when it comes to finance and accounting issues and fiscal reform and reform of any kind. I think the accountants' opinions should be sought. Now, I won't go into a lot of details, but one of the things that a professional body in Greece said, they were so shocked by it. They also realized this day, they never thought this day would come, that they would be sought their views. They weren't quite prepared. So I guess the lesson I learned is that you should aspire to become a center of excellence and an organization that your government and your business community will go to seek your advice. And when they do, you really do need to be prepared to speak with one voice and have advice to offer them. Another example, moving on our grand world tour, is Singapore. I mentioned Singapore a few weeks ago when we had the ICAEW event in Bulgaria, and it's largely a different audience today, so I thought I'd mention it again. When you think of Singapore, for many of us who understand the financial community, international investment, Singapore is known as a very reliable, strong financial center. It's also got a very trustworthy investment climate. More importantly for the profession and for IFAC, the member body there is already a thought leader. So you think, okay, it's done everything. What more could it possibly do? Well, here's a great proactive example that both the profession and the government's taking on. Singaporeans, they don't just sort of stop where they're at. They're very innovative. They've made a declaration that Singapore becomes recognized as a regional and international accountancy hub. What does that mean, accountancy hub? Is it growing accountants from left, right, and center? Well, it's a little bit more than that. It's saying that there was no way that Singapore could have such a strong investment climate if it didn't have strong accountants throughout the whole process supporting it. But why stop there? It wanted to become a world leader. It wanted to be a place where companies internationally could outsource accounting to them. And more importantly, it could be a regional hub to train accountants in the neighboring countries. So I thought that was a very exciting regional initiative. And I too see that there are some sub-regions here. And one aspiration is for a sub-region here to become an accountancy hub. The last story I'll share with you, because I know I'm fast approaching, or I might have gone beyond my 5 minutes now, is Canada and the US. The Canadians and the Americans, they did suffer from the financial crisis, but the story I want to tell is that they actually went through this whole complication of losing statutory audit for private entities many years ago. Robert probably knows better than I do when that happened. I think I was still a trainee auditor when it happened. It might have well been 15, 20 years ago. And at that point, a lot of companies no longer were required to have an audit. There was a lot of fear in the profession. There was a lot of concern by small entities what was to happen now. But now if you go to Canada and the US and you look at the profession there, you would not think that these were thriving organizations where statutory audit is just a smaller part of the profession. What do? They transformed themselves. They no longer looked at the professional body and the profession solely as auditors or accountants. They focus on the concept of a professional accountant, a professional that's able to do auditing, regulated that is, and licensed, or if they decide to move on from auditing, because of their professionalization and their continuing education, they're actually able to move on to other parts of the sector, whether that's to become a CEO, to be an accountant, or to be a consultant. I want to mention that one because I know the loss of statutory audit is becoming a theme in a large part of the world and might happen to some of your countries, but that means that it's time to prepare for it if it does happen, and there are opportunities. And more importantly, your members will look to you to help transform the profession so that they've actually got more to offer. That's it, Robert.
Very good. I won't tell you how long it took, but it's okay. So turn now to Gwyn.
Thank you, Robert. Dobry den. Those are my 2 words of Russian. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you this afternoon. My name is Gwyn Griffiths. I'm a partner in Deloitte, so I'm possibly unique in being the recipient of the services of professional bodies and recipient of the regulation thereof, and a participant from the other end of the spectrum. So I wanted to give you my perspective from that side. I'm actually a quality and risk partner. That's my duty, not my personal attributes. And part of my responsibility is looking after the risk of our investment into the Deloitte CIS practice, which is not insignificant. I've been in this space of risk and regulation for 20 years now, so I've got a degree of experience of being regulated by the English and Welsh Institute and by various statutory bodies. From a global organisation's perspective, it's important that there's a clarity around what is the regulated auditing and accounting profession. I think looking from outside, if you see the disconnection between who is regulating what bits of what profession, it's very difficult to say, where do I go to get a responsible, high-quality audit done, or where do I go to get responsible, high-quality accounting? And so I think as regulators, you need to have a very clear vision as to how you can give that clarity to those of us outside. I think one thing that's interesting that Robert got close to explaining earlier was about the accounting versus auditing thing, and we got into mandatory versus voluntary membership of bodies. I mean, here in the UK, it's voluntary for me to be a member of the ICAEW, and I don't do audits, thank goodness for everybody, but I remain a member because it has a great brand and it gives me a lot of support in areas that I need support. What is mandated in the UK is that those who audit accounts must be regulated, and the English Institute, along with various other institutes, are licensed to give that registration. So there's a blend in play of the regulation and the voluntary. It's not mandated that I join his body, but if I want to sign audit opinions, I've got to join one of them and get regulated. But in order to deliver that to people, I think there are three things that the self-regulated organisations need. They need to set the high standards of accreditation. It needs to perform comprehensive monitoring, and it needs to execute justice where people move outside the rules or the standards. The accreditation standards need to be stable. They don't need to change all the time, and they need to enable quite...
Правила постоянно менять, и нужно, квалификации должны меняться, и должно, чтобы достаточно большое количество людей получить эту квалификацию могло. Нужно, чтобы эта группа аудиторов...
The first line, I would say, of auditing standards to maintain and set standards in my firm is my firm. The English Institute and the other institutes and government have a role in keeping us honest, but we regulate the profession, really. My partners do a good job because they are professional, not because I'm going to beat them with a big stick or exclude them from membership of a professional body. Comprehensive monitoring, whether that's peer review or using regulatory personnel, is essential to maintain the professional standards and to maintain the public confidence in financial reporting. And I think one should look at examples of where those monitoring reviews work well and where they work badly. And I look at not only at our own institutes and our own regulator, but financial services regulators to work out how to come up with effective, incisive and useful regulation that improves standards rather than just punishing those who transgress. And then discipline was the third of those items. Disciplinary matters, when they arise, need to be dealt with swiftly and justly. It is not in the interests of the profession or the users of the profession or the regulators or the public if there is no justice or if it is slow, and it therefore needs to be dealt with. Issues that arise in professions need to be dealt with very quickly and fairly and robustly. And as a regulated firm, I believe that our strength is having that sort of regulation, and I don't want to shy away and say I want weak regulation or a regulator that is ineffective in that sense. And therefore the SROs have a great part to play in making sure justice is fair and swift. I think with those three planks in place, that we can ensure that the auditing and accounting professions can be universally viewed as high quality, which then enables a global consistent standard of financial reporting, which is vital for capital flows, it's vital for trust, it's vital for transactions wherever they happen. Thank you. Spasiba.
Thank you very much. You know a third word. You are being far too modest. So now I can turn to John Edwards from London Stock Exchange, who might have an American accent.
Okay. Я думаю, что вот постараюсь все-таки по-русски.
Well, I'll try and talk Russian, but with American accents. My name is John Edwards. I've been working for London Stock Exchange for more than 9 years now. I'm working with companies preparing to float, do placement in London. I work with all CIS countries. I've got quite a big experience of working with companies who intend to do an IPO in London. I would like to fit my comments in the general topic. I support my colleagues, that's true. Standards and codes. They even in my business they simplify the process of placements and raising capital via exchange. This is first challenge. Well, we've got a lot of challenges and problems in the market now. Well, you mentioned Greece and other macroeconomic problems, but I should say that well, we don't have that many IPOs now. We still can look at the costs of IPO, and here standardization and preparation of accounts, financial reporting really matters. And we're at the initial stage of development of business companies when they work with local organizations and local firms, where it's all this process is properly set up within the company when the company has gone through this process of globalization. The process of IPO process would be much cheaper and simpler. Last week I had a discussion with one company which works closely with such firms as Deloitte, PwC, and Big Four. They specialize on preparing business model, on reports at the initial stage, just to prepare a proper, sensible foundation, and that's very important because that allows to minimize IPO costs themselves. Here. I understand that Anastasia is going to talk later. Here, IFRS holds a key place, and the process of conversion of local reporting to IFRS. Well, as you know, you need kind of 3 years of accounts and local accounts, and conversion it all to IFRS could be very costly. But if a company is already using IFRS or on a local level, that could really simplify and the process and make it cheaper. We, as a stock exchange, over the last 9 years, I've been looking over radical changes in the system. It's not the first time I'm working with the organization, not here, but in London Stock Exchange we had IPO conferences and seminars, and I'm seeing a lot of improvement in terms of standardization of accounts reporting, and that's all from me.
Thank you very much. When I said that he would speak in an American accent, you didn't think that would be Russian in an American accent. I don't actually know if it was Russian and American accent. It could have been a perfect Russian accent, but maybe my Russian friends can tell me. And our final panelist is Anastasia, who I think will be speaking in Russian unless everyone's out to surprise me this afternoon. Particular focus on qualifications. Anastasia.
Спасибо большое. Я позволите, буду говорить на русском.
Well, thank you very much. If you allow me, I'll speak Russian. Well, I would like to turn our discussion slightly differently. We've been talking about recognition of reporting. My primary question is what the profession starts from. It starts from development, from training. So that's why it's very important to develop professional standards. What I mean is the training standards, description of qualification requirements at every stage of development of a professional. And in the first half of the day today, we were saying that the ICAEW somehow often replaces this qualification and training, because it's difficult to imagine for us, because probably higher education training is not as expensive as in the UK, and is subsidized by the state. But still, we've got a gap between academic education and workplaces, and I'm sure that this gap should be filled with some kind of professional training and skills, and I think professional bodies could play a very important role here and become guarantors of professionalism of their members in their workplaces. As you understand, professional bodies, they run tests or confirmations of a number of qualifications. What happens in effect as ICAEW analyzes the compliance of programs with its standards, which is very important. Here I would like to say a couple of words what we do in Russia about this. In 2012, we had a presidential decree which says that by 2015 we need to introduce and approve at least 800 professional standards. It doesn't specify which, but obviously including standards in financial sphere. So the government of the Russian Federation, as a result, approved a number of documents. First of all, it's a qualification level for professional standards. We usually translate it as framework qualifications. Russian qualifications correlate perfectly with UK qualifications and European qualifications. Also, we've developed the template for professional standard template and the rules of development, which say that professional standards can be developed by professional communities, by employers associations, other organizations with the necessary involvement of education institutions. So here we understand that qualifications should be at the juncture of academic education and professional training. Probably similar processes go on in your countries as well. And I think at this stage of development of profession, it's very important to take international experience into account, because in future we're going to talk not just about comparison of standards, but about recognition and comparison of qualifications. Robert, did I fit it in within my 5 minutes? Thank you.
If you'd wanted. What a waste. So thank you to our panellists. It's probably appropriate to turn this over straight away for your questions and observations, but we've had really a number of perspectives, external perspectives, looking at the development of profession in the countries represented here. We've had some examples of professions responding to challenges from Sylvia. We've had some of the expectations that an international accounting firm looks to national regimes to satisfy, and actually an appetite for strengthening the profession and regulation. We've had John talking about the what's sought, particularly in terms of quality of reporting for accessing international capital markets, and we've had Anastasia looking at the way in which qualifications can be benchmarked and how we can have a relationship between the academic and the professional communities. So there's plenty to go out there, and I suppose I'm just as ever hopeful that some hands will go up and people can express a point of view, make a comment, or ask a question. Would anybody like to put their hand up, and Vadim will come along with a microphone. Very good. Thank you.
Kozyrev.
Mr. Kozyrev, I represent not just auditors but accountants, but I used to be an auditor and I used to be a regulator as well. And our topic here is a strategic development of the profession. And for many years already, we've been talking about the trends in the world. Well, the first is the reporting becomes more complicated. It's becoming more and more complicated. As an accountant, I'm talking as an accountant, I work as an accountant now, hardly any single entry, any figure is from accounts now. It's more, almost all of them are estimates, so the accountant is becoming more and more of an estimator or valuer, and knowledge of accounting procedures becomes less and less relevant. And the auditors are checking not just accounting processes and accounting procedures anymore, but the final results. And also the auditor must become a risk manager and understand what risks are related to the business and what risks are reflected in the reporting. As a result, the question is what the profession of accountant and auditor is turning into, and whether we need to involve valuers and risk managers in our profession and develop some kind of common community. And another issue, my colleague from the LSE, probably aware of this, is the fact that the reporting and the audit profession becoming losing credibility or less losing status because people who we call users do not have time to read the reports. Over the last 20 years, I work in Lukoil now. Our first report was 20 pages, now it's 200 pages. And when I go on various roadshows to stock exchanges as well, when I ask analysts, have you ever read any report in full, they say no. Every analyst has 10 minutes to review a $100 billion company like Lukoil. What can you do with other companies? So it's not possible to read everything. So there is a gap as a result. The gap is that our auditors and accountants as professionals are becoming hostages to our own compliance and losing our users as well at the same time. And at the same time, the users, including analysts, recommend buying or selling securities, and they rely not on reporting most of the time. And that's true. They're relying mostly on hearsay, on the media, on their understanding of the company. And we need to resolve this problem somehow. And that's, I think, the strategic way forward for our profession.
I thought of introducing a 5-minute time limit on the question, but I think the applause that it receives suggests that you could have gone on even longer. I suppose I could be cruel and say that seems to be primarily a question for John, in that you talked about the importance of financial information in the process of access to markets, but from Mr. Kozyrev, we had quite a challenge as to whether the communication that accountants do is losing its relevance and its central role. There's probably a wider discussion which we could have in any country in the world about increasing complexity of reporting and the role of valuation. But maybe if we just pick up on that in the first instance, is accounting losing its relevance in the marketing of companies to the international markets?
Excellent question. I'm going to switch to my American now because I'm going off script. But I think you've addressed the issue of whether people have enough time to read accounts. There's the wider issue of whether people have enough time to read the full prospectus, or whether they do at all. And indeed, you have some people who just skip to the risk factors, or look just at specific sections of the prospectus in terms of the accounts. Certainly, you do see some people focusing on the notes, just looking at the top line numbers. But by and large, I think it is still highly relevant. In terms of the rules, in terms of the obligations for 3 years of IFRS accounts. I mean, I think that's something that is pretty sacred. It's not going to change for the time being. You can't account for every sort of contingency. So yes, things are changing. Times are getting more hurried, and people are having less time. But you are seeing an evolution. You are seeing new developments. The focus in Russia, for example, now XBRL tagging has taken on a new importance, and that's going to introduce changes in the way that people read reports as well as making it easier to look and evaluate and perform analysis. So things are changing. Whether it needs to be sort of mandated top down, I don't think so. I think it's changing already from within. But I'll leave that to my more astute colleagues from the accounting profession.
Well done, you handle that accounting question very well. Maybe I could, whilst giving the rest of the panel time to think about what they might want to say, I think there's a very important consequence of your observations, and it's one that we, as ICAEW, point out whenever we travel around the world talking about accounting issues and accounting developments, and that is that this really is an area of great debate and controversy. So perhaps for a period of time people are just think, well, we've got to learn whatever the system is that's coming from the IASB or the international standard setters or the regulators, and there's a learning phase. But then actually there's a questioning and challenging phase of saying, well, hang on, if we're going to be part of this international accounting, reporting and auditing community, then we actually need to take part in the debates at the highest level. And although I didn't emphasize it this morning in my comments, that's a large part of what a professional body does. And if professional bodies in all of your countries are going to be seen as credible and important people in the business community, they can't just say, well, these are the rules that we've got to apply and we can't do anything about them, because they won't command a lot of respect. They have to be able to say that they are taking part in active debates about what accounting and auditing and regulation should look like. And so I think that has to be part of the aspiration for the professional bodies from the countries represented here, that they actually take part in that, because the standard setters might be wrong. They might be heading in the wrong direction. And you will certainly find on our website, ICAEW website, a lot of thinking about the future of financial reporting and auditing. So I don't know if anyone else would like to make any comments. Sylvia's looking good, and of course IFAC with another hat on is a major international standard setter, so you might want to defend the cause or join the attack.
Well, no, I think it's clear that standards have gotten complex, and it's a complex world, and Lukoil is a complex business, but wearing my personal hat, I do tend to think that it's very hard for certain users to really understand what's going on. But I don't forgive the analysts for being lazy and not really trying to understand how much they should understand. I'm going to actually address one of the easier aspects of what Igor mentioned. I think you made a comment about the complexity and evaluation. We're just estimators now. And I'm not suggesting that in every country there's an opportunity to embrace other professions that might have an interest in this, but we definitely have seen a movement around the world that there are more and more professional accountancy bodies getting to know an organization named the International Standards Valuations Council. When fair value accounting came in, and a lot of accountants and their clients had to look at valuation standards, and a lot of countries don't really have them. They might have real estate, but that's it. So the relationship between the accounting profession and the evaluators is a little bit different in each country, but generally I would say there's a trend of more dialogue, except in Germany for some reason there's no valuation chapter there. So I think I would encourage everyone to make an inquiry about that because it's very collaborative.
Gwen, I think you wanted to say something.
I'll say a few words. I have to be quite careful because my Russian wife is also Deloitte's head of IFRS implementation. And so I must support...
I'll just write down what you're saying then.
So I must support IFRS in every way. However, I would say I know which analysts I shouldn't go to now. When I look at accounts. The reality is you can't wind the clock back, and the importance of transparency of financial information is vital, and we all look at different things. That doesn't mean you can make it shorter, it just means that people look at different things in a bigger report that are important to them. I think auditors have always needed to be able to value and determine make judgments on things, and that's not new. And I think the standing joke was that we should all be issued on qualification with a crystal ball because we're not only meant to value the present but also value the future. And we do that ever more. And I think the challenge is making sure that the Lukoils and the VTBs and the likes are reporting on a global scale with the necessary detail, but we don't apply that necessarily to every single company in our economy and stifle growth and stifle useful information to the people who really need it.
Thank you. And I'll probably look for another question, but I don't wish to sound like every question that's raised I make a point about what ICAEW does, but I'll do it again. We do have a valuation special interest group in ICAEW with something like 800 members in it, including people from outside the accountancy profession. And I think we're the only accountancy professional body that's a member of the International Valuation Standards Council, and have had enjoyable discussions with Sir David Tweedy, who's now chair of the IVSC, about how the accountancy profession can share its experience to make sure that we professionalise the valuation professional community. So if you're there as an accountancy body showing an interest, then you have something to contribute. And I would think that in all your countries, even if there's only a small scale of operation, well, if there are people in your country who are involved in valuation, then reach out to them, because if they can take part in professional discussions, that's good. It's a challenge and an opportunity, and you'll be more relevant to business if you're seen as bringing people together to talk about professional issues. So, we've got another question over here, and Vadim, ready with the microphone.
Hello, my name is Anna Samsonova, and I represent the academic community, and I'm really sorry for not speaking Russian. Although I'm Russian myself, but these days it's easier for me to speak English when I speak about accounting. So I would argue that what we observe now is the fact that the accountancy profession is potentially one of the most internationalized in the world. So we have international standards on auditing, IFRS, we have international ethics rules. So then we have a bunch of international firms that have offices all over the world and in all of the countries that are represented here. Then we also have professional bodies that, although they are initially established in a particular national context, we can see that, as ICAEW call themselves a global thought leader and the leader for the global accountancy profession. And I can name a few more UK-based bodies that make very similar claims, or bodies in other parts of the world. So I would argue that effectively what we're observing is the unification of accounting knowledge, where this knowledge is not dependent on the context where it's practiced necessarily, or less dependent. So my question is, because I want to really to hear the opinions of people coming from different contexts here. So my question is, what has been the impact of this unification on the authority and capacity of the national governments or regulators and national professional bodies to determine the way their accounting professions should develop? That would be my question.
Okay, a big challenge, perhaps too big a challenge to take on with 3 minutes to go before another coffee break. But given the internationalization of the accountancy profession, how does that affect the future, the role of national accountancy bodies and regulators? Well, I would certainly invite any contribution from the participants here, but I don't know if there's any reflections from the panel here. I guess, Sylvia, it's part of your life that it's both, isn't it? There's national bodies and there's international standards.
Yeah, maybe just a couple of thoughts. You know, after Enron, we all know a lot of things changed for the profession. And one of the things my colleague, who is responsible for regulation at ICAEW, always reminds me is that we all don't like regulation, but the reality of it is that if you have members that are in regulated services, having a regulator, a good regulator that knows what they're doing, does give the profession credibility. I'm making that reference because we have seen a shift. We all know we've seen a shift in the role of the profession in standard setting and regulation. And I think the question was about internationalization, if we see an impact. There is an international regulator, audit regulator, ICAEW. I've seen their membership grow, and for those of you who are audit regulators, when you've asked us, we've always said you should contact ICAEW, because I think ICAEW, its mandate is to try to be very inclusive of the audit regulation practice. ICAEW itself is probably a bit under-resourced, so it probably wants to do a lot more. So on that spectrum, I do see movement, but I suspect there's a lot more to go. On the accountancy body side, for IFAC, I don't want to go into a long 3-minute speech about what we do, but I do feel that the new requirements we imposed of our members about 8 years ago to participate in a compliance program structured around 7 statements of membership obligation has made an impact. We've measured that impact. We hear about the impact when we come to these events. And we also see standard setting change, despite the fact that there's still more to do in IFRS and ISA adoption implementation. What's very good to know is that people don't view adoption implementation as just simply translating a book and then sticking it somewhere. Knowing that it's a process is what really makes an impact, and investing in the implementation, I think, has been critical.
Thank you. Anybody else up here like to comment?
I'd say one thing, that as your countries play an ever more important role on the global scene, taking over a dominant position in many industries, that your voice at the table of the regulators is vital, because you will see things and understand things in a different way, and you need to make those standards, those global standards, applicable to the industries where you are the world leaders. So if a standard is being developed for extractive industries, then CIS countries need to be there to discuss the impact on your clients, on your geographies of those things. So I think there's a huge voice that you need to have at those tables. Otherwise, you will continue to feel that you don't have an important role, and you need to turn that around completely to be seen as a driver of the development of standards and improving standards, which will give the profession a greater standing within your own marketplace with your clients and with the companies that you service.
Okay, I sense there that we've actually got an important theme here emerging about the contribution that bodies from the countries represented here can make to international standard setting and regulation, so it's better informed. But Anastasia would also like to make some comments on this.
Да, я бы хотела буквально пару слов.
Yes, I would like to say a couple of words and make the comment. I think the role of such organization as ICAEW is very important because we talk about those who make the reporting and those who are the users use the same language. We said that in this ICAEW, there are people who represent various professions, and it gives us the opportunity to find our own place, those who are the users and those who make the financial reports. Thank you.
So, I think we've reached the end of the time for this final panel. You can have half an hour more coffee or tea or getting to the street for a smoke, but do make sure that you're back for 4 o'clock when we will have our final discussion. And if you're thinking, oh, well, this is now the discussion at our tables, yes, it is a discussion at your tables, but what we will do is make sure that somebody who has been a panelist earlier in the day chairs a discussion at your table, and I will be asking them to feed back to the gathering here as a whole the results of the discussion at the table. So this is the one part that is really requires participation and a real competitive spirit to see which table has the best discussion. So if you would like to, and you will be given questions to discuss, but if you want to now go and refresh yourselves so that you're ready for the final hour and a half of a very productive day, then do go and get yourself a drink and come back for 4 o'clock. Many thanks, and would you finally thank our panelists with a big round of applause.